The two men running for president of the United States sat down across the table, then took turns criticizing each other. Barack Obama and Mitt Romney met in Boca Raton, Florida, 2 weeks before Americans go to the polls. They exchanged different views about U.S. foreign policy. They argued over U.S. interests in Libya, Syria and Iran, among other places. Romney criticized Obama's foreign policy as a failure and said the U.S. should take a leading role. A CNN poll taken right after the debate suggests 48% of respondents believed Obama won. 40% said Romney did.
The fight for the most powerful job in the world. Monday night was the final face-off for President Obama and Republican rival Mitt Romney before Election Day. The focus for this third debate was foreign policy, and as expected, they sparred over the Arab Spring, the threat of terrorism, China and Iran. Romney had the first say, outlining how he would deal with extremism in the Muslim world.
The strategy is pretty straightforward, which is to go after the bad guys, to make sure we do our very best to interrupt them, to kill them, to take them out of the picture.
The president's challenge was to defend his own record while questioning Romney's capacity to steer the nation through a crisis.
You know, when it comes to our foreign policy, you seem to want to import the foreign policies of the 1980s, just like the social policies of the 1950s and the economic policies of the 1920s. And the challenge we have, I know you haven't been in a position to actually execute foreign policy, but every time you've offered an opinion, you've been wrong.
In relation to the U.S. stance on Iran, Romney took a swipe at Obama of going on an apology tour of the Middle East to make the U.S. look weak and allowing Iran get closer to a nuclear bomb. Obama laughed off the accusation, describing it as possibly the biggest blunder yet by his rival. Although the debate was supposed to focus on foreign policy, both took several opportunities to pivot it towards the U.S. economy.
Mr. President, the reason I call it an apology tour is because you went to the Middle East and you flew to Egypt and to Saudi Arabia and to Turkey and Iraq. And by the way, you skipped Israel, our closest friend in the region. You said that on occasion America had dictated to other nations. Mr. President, America has not dictated to other nations. We have freed other nations from dictators.
Let me respond. You know, if we're going to talk about trips that we've taken, you know, when I was a candidate for office, first trip I took was to visit our troops. And when I went to Israel as a candidate, I didn't take donors. I didn't attend fundraisers. I went to Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum there, to remind myself the nature of evil and why our bond with Israel will be unbreakable. The clock is ticking. You know, we're not going to allow Iran to perpetually engage in negotiations that lead nowhere. And I've been very clear to them. You know, because of the intelligence coordination that we do with a range of countries, including Israel, we have a sense of when they would get breakout capacity, which means that we would not be able to intervene in time to stop their nuclear program. And that clock is ticking. And we're going to make sure that if they do not meet the demands of the international community, then we are going to take all options necessary to make sure they don't have a nuclear weapon.
And one of the challenges we've had with Iran is that they have looked at this administration and felt that the administration was not as strong as it needed to be. I think they saw weakness where they had expected to find American strength. And I say that because from the very beginning, the president in his campaign some 4 years ago said he'd meet with all the world's worst actors. In his first year, he'd sit down with Chavez and Kim Jong-il, with Castro, and with President Ahmadinejad of Iran. And I think they looked and thought, well, that's an unusual honor to receive from the President of the United States. And then the President began what I've called an apology tour of going to various nations in the Middle East and criticizing America. I think they looked at that and saw weakness.
Nothing Governor Romney just said is true. Starting with this notion of me apologizing. This has been probably the biggest whopper that's been told during the course of this campaign. And every fact checker and every reporter who's looked at it, Governor has said this is not true.
I congratulate him on taking out Osama bin Laden and going after the leadership in al-Qaeda. But we can't kill our way out of this mess. We're going to have to put in place a very comprehensive and robust strategy to help the world of Islam and other parts of the world reject this radical, violent extremism.
Governor Romney, I'm glad that you recognize that al-Qaeda is a threat, because a few months ago, when you were asked what's the biggest geopolitical threat facing America, you said Russia. Not al-Qaeda, you said Russia. In the 1980s are now calling to ask for their foreign policy back, because the Cold War has been over for 20 years. But, Governor, when it comes to our foreign policy, you seem to want to import the foreign policies of the 1980s.
Attacking me is not an agenda. Attacking me is not talking about how we're going to deal with the challenges that exist in the Middle East and take advantage of the opportunity there and stem the tide of this violence.
I know you haven't been in a position to actually execute foreign policy, but every time you've offered an opinion, you've been wrong. You said we should have gone into Iraq, despite the fact that there were no weapons of mass destruction.
This part of the campaign now over. The candidates go on the trail. They will be sprinting from swing state to swing state, those handful of states that will actually decide who wins the U.S. presidency in just about 2 weeks.